one of the mindset shifts that we have there is your team is there to support you and your vision, not the other way around. You've got an amazing mission that you're on, you've got a big vision, and they are here to support that, not you as the leader are here to kind of just keep pouring into your team. Now, of course, do we have to develop people and pour into them? Of course we do. But it's still that shift of no, you are the leader, your vision, your mission, your culture, your values, and let's attract people into that space as opposed to possibly trying to attract them through people pleasing and over niceness. And before you know it, you've agreed to virtual working for your paralegal, and it absolutely was never going to work for you in the vision that you had.
Welcome to the CSG Law Firm Podcast, where we talk all things law firm finance, operations, strategies, and feature those who have dared to embrace bold changes in the legal landscape. I'm your host, Chelsea Williams, founder of Core Solutions Group and chief financial architect for law firms since 2017. I get the rare glimpse behind the curtain and into operations, mindset, and money habits that make or break law firms. Since COVID, everything we thought we knew about how a law firm should run, look, and feel have been shattered. And out of that disruption, a new kind of law firm owner has emerged, one who's bold enough to build outside the box. Around here, we spotlight those renegades, owners who blend legal brilliance with real business strategy, who build boldly, think creatively, and know that money isn't just math, it's mindset. We don't shy away from hard truths. We lean in with curiosity, grit, and a little humor. Whether you're scaling, stabilizing, or just trying to stay sane, you'll find stories, strategies, and straight talk to help you run a more profitable, value-driven law firm. So grab your coffee or your case files and let's get into it. Because it's time to ditch the stuffy suits and take control of your cash flow, build something bold, and prioritize protecting profits in your pocket. Welcome back to the Law Firm Money Matters podcast, where we talk all things and nothing about money. I'm your host, Chelsea Williams, founder of Core Solutions Group and your law firm's go-to chief financial architect. Today's episode is fire. If you're a woman running a law firm and feeling like you've built something, but it's starting to run you instead of the other way around, this one's for you. I sat down with international business strategist Vanessa Shaw, founder of the Business Growth Academy, and we had a powerful, unapologetic conversation about what it really means to be the CEO of your law firm. We talked about time, burnout, team tolerance, and the big one, money mindset. Vanessa shares the mindset shift that every woman attorney has to make if they want to build something profitable and freeing. And we dig into the difference between building by default and building by design. Get ready. This is not your average business podcast advice. This is truth, clarity, and next level strategy. First of all, I just want to thank you for taking the time to be on this podcast. I know what you do is going to be so valuable to our listeners.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, guys, today we have Vanessa Shaw with us. I am genuinely excited to have this conversation with her. Vanessa is an international business strategist with experience across not only the USA, but the UK and Europe. So an incredibly well-rounded perspective and a lot of experience. She's held leadership roles at top organizations, including the UN, World Economic Forum, KPMG, Oracle, and CMS, where she pioneered a cross-border virtual coaching program for attorneys in 2006. And today, as the founder of the Business Growth Academy, Vanessa helps women-owned law firms scale with, and I love this part, purpose, profit, and personal freedom. Her proven business acceleration model combines strategic growth with authentic leadership, empowering female attorneys to build sustainable practices that reflect their values and deliver exceptional client value. Like, I have goosebumps just reading that.
Oh, thank you.
It's just so amazing to be able to help law firm owners and especially women step into this place to where they can really embody all of these things. And so my first question for you, Vanessa, is, you've worked with everyone from billion-dollar corporations to solo law firm owners. What is the biggest mindset shift that you believe women attorneys in particular need to make if they want to build a firm that's both profitable and freeing?
Yeah, I love that. And listen, I just want to just go back and actually correct because there's a little distinction here in my bio. I am all about integrity and really getting like the true words. There was a little word in there that may be misleading. I did. I worked at the UN. That is my background many years ago in Switzerland. The roles that I played in those bigger organizations were as an executive coach, coming in from the outside. And again, I think that's a really important distinction. I was not a corporate gal. I never was. So the UN was my big thing. And then I actually retrained actually, it was a life coach back in the day. And I rapidly became an executive coach, business coach, kind of, I think I was a life coach for about 12 months. And that got me into this world of business, very organically. And so we kind of fast forward today, as you say, that biggest mindset shift, what we're seeing with women-owned law firms is they've got to make the mindset shift away from being the practicing attorney, the managing partner attorney that is doing all of the lawyering plus a lot of other things, to being the CEO of their law firm. Without that shift, Chelsea, it's like they just get stuck in the weeds the whole time. Everything is dependent on them. They're not coming up as the visionary, right? To really take a view of their whole firm, where they want to go with vision, setting those goals, setting the milestones, really thinking intentionally about who they want to serve. Because a lot of the women, when they come to us, they're already successful, but they've built their firms by default rather than by
Mhm.
design, right? So they haven't even come up to think about who's an ideal client. What do they want the future of that firm to look like? What would they like their teams to look like? And again, there's many, many different structures. And of course, the piece that's probably music to your ears is the financials. As you probably know as well, there's still a lot of, in the financial space with women-owned law firms, it's kind of they pay themselves what's left over.
Mm.
And as they're growing and scaling, it's like, no, we're reversing all of that. This is about you've got to pay yourself first. Like your firm has got to work for you. You've put in the blood, sweat, and tears up until this point. It's got to pay you and it's got to pay your future because nobody else is going to fund your future. So that for me is that fundamental shift, thinking about all of those things and then systems and efficiency. That's a CEO conversation. That's not an attorney conversation. And I know that the women that we do our best work with, they haven't made that shift practically, but they know that that's what they have to do, and they're like, I want to be the CEO, but now like give me a roadmap. Where do I start? What do I focus on next? But that's an internal decision, and I always say it's okay to not want to do that. It's okay to want to be a solo, get the work, do the work, be paid to get the work. That's a great model. It can work for many, many women. But I would just encourage those women that really want to grow, don't get stuck in that model if you really want something bigger and a lot more impact and freedom, because of course there's limitations of being solo.
I agree with everything that you said. And I see that too. The mindset shift of, and it's difficult because when you start a business and it's just you, you are in the work, you are doing the things. Like you said, you don't even have the time or mental capacity to kind of lift your head up and say, okay, this is my business. These are the pieces. This is the vision. These are the milestones. In your experience, what is the biggest thing that is kind of holding women back from being able to lift their head up?
Oh my gosh. How long's the list, right? Um, One of the top things, I mean, there's two, and they're intricately linked, right? In time, right, is probably the number one excuse reason we hear, right? And when I say excuse reason, it's plausible because law firms, unfortunately, have grown and evolved in this what I believe is now an outdated, very masculine-driven model. Because let's face it, the industry was created, for men by men. And everything is about the billable hours, putting in the time, getting the clients, as many billable hours as you can do. You kind of, you work all the hours around the clock. And you wear that like a badge of honor. So a lot of the women that we're working with, of course, they've still inherited that mindset, right? Even though they may have left big law or law firms to go into smaller firms, running their own firms, that mentality still prevails. It runs incredibly deep. And so it's not that it's an excuse. I mean, I'll have women say, Vanessa, you've got to look at my calendar. And I'm like, I believe you. I know full well you're doing 60 plus hour work weeks. And some of them will even say, if only I was doing 60 plus hour work, 60-hour weeks, right? That would be a goal right now because they're closer to 80. So time is a massive, massive issue. And I would say with that, of course, overwhelm. So that's why I say they're so linked. They're probably the two biggest things that we hear, kind of in an initial conversation. I'm just so overwhelmed. I don't have the mental capacity. I don't have the time. I can't breathe. I can barely, I mean, they'll say things, Vanessa, I barely have time to pee, being back to back with clients or team meetings. Like I actually need a bio break right now, let alone, time to think about vision. Now, one of the things that we'll often say that, and I get it, that is when the reality presents as we're so time poor and stretched thin and very overwhelmed. And on that cusp, it's frankly the cusp of burnout. And again, that's another term that these women will use a lot. I'm burning out. And it's not necessarily like the real psychological burnout from extreme stress, although many of them, I mean, we have clients or prospects that we're speaking to that have just got out of the hospital and they've had a wake up call. I mean, it really is at that point. But I'm talking about even the burnout of the grind of keep grinding the same things like day in, day out, right? There's just no pause. There's no vacation. There's no, if I have time on the weekend free, I feel guilty because I know that there's just this pile of stuff back in the firm to deal with. And or otherwise I'm sacrificing, family time, friend time, girlfriend time, whatever it might be, because I'm back in the office doing that thing, right? So it's a really challenging place. And for anybody listening that's really at that space, first and foremost, I want you to know that there is so much hope, right? It really doesn't have to be that way. And please be mindful of engaging in those sorts of conversations with other women in similar situations that reinforces that this is the norm and that this is the way it has to be. Because if you come into a world like ours, in like the Business Growth Academy, we're in a very different conversation. And we can quickly show these women that they are spending time in the wrong places, frankly. And that's not to make anybody feel bad, right? It's just that we're so busy. As you said, you don't have that time to think strategically and intentionally. But we know full well that we can easily, and I say this easily because we've done it so many times, we can find 4 to 8 hours a week immediately. That's a lot of time for somebody that feels like they have no time, right? Because there's things being spent in the, what we call low value activities, things that frankly probably don't need to be done, things that could be, outsourced, things that could be delayed and dumped. I mean, sometimes we see that, I'm like, why are you working on that right now? This is not what you need to be doing at this stage of growth. So I think that those are really the two biggies. I say it's that time, the time poor and overwhelmed. And those are typically like the very first, problems that we're at least going to get some relief around. So that then it's with that space, like we can breathe again. Typically, that's one of the first things. And I'll see that in our clients. It's just like this, this just visual relief, like the shoulders go down. They're not, their energy kind of isn't all up here in their like head and chest. And all of a sudden they're a bit more grounded. And they'll say things like, wow, it's the first time I've actually been able to like step back and start to think about what I actually want, what I want to create and what I want the firm to do. And of course, once we start to get to there and we're now tapping into vision and desires, there's energy, right, that comes from
Mm.
that. That's the piece that I say starts to give hope. Now, they typically don't know how to get there at that point, and that's okay. We have the roadmaps. We kind of know what needs to happen, but it's like that's that space that we have to tap into is right the desires and that vision because that's the piece that starts to give a lot of hope and optimism.
Mm. Two things that I really appreciate you acknowledging in what you just said is number one, it's lack of time and overwhelm, but a lot of times that stems from our belief of how we're supposed to get there.
Hmm.
And the fact that in the legal space, particularly, which is still male dominated, one of the industries that actually is behind the average curve of male to women counterparts, this is what we were conditioned to believe that we work hard and we grind. And that belief is what allows us and law firm owners and women to stay there and continue the grind and talk ourselves out of changing it. And the second thing that you acknowledged is that we absorb the energy of the people around us. And I love that you are telling these women, do not surround yourself with other people who are going to perpetuate the belief that is going to keep you stuck. There
Yeah,
are, in fact, different conversations happening. There are other ways to do it. And the more we remove ourselves from the belief and from the energy that it's not something that we can do, because what we're doing is not working in these
exactly.
situations.
Yeah,
Right. And so I like your word excuse. We are giving ourselves excuses. And yes, it can come off as harsh, but sometimes we need that jolt. We need the reality of that is an excuse. And yes, these reasons may be valid, but not being able to change them is in fact an excuse. And so I really appreciate those two pieces of what you said.
well, it's the ultimate in disempowerment as well, right? It's like, we're all about empowering women. I mean, that's really that, at our core, that's our mission, right? It's really empowering women. Okay, ours is through business and it's empowering them financially, right? Because we believe that, the next level of freedom for women is financial freedom, right? Because, finances give more choices, choices give freedom, right? So, the ultimate in disempowerment and lack of agency is when we just say this is the way it has to be. And as you say, and what we don't realize is that we often unconsciously seek out other people to reinforce the status quo, which is why I always say, like, be careful. Like the conversations, I always say that with my clients, like the conversations we're having in here are very different to the conversations out there. And they'll say that, of course, once they become aware of it, they're like, oh my gosh, now you've started to shine the light on this. We can see how the majority are in a conversation that is basically keeping them stuck and status quo. And it is, I say, it's the ultimate in disempowerment. So that's where we have to shift that mindset. And then we've got to shift the language and the conversation that we're actually having.
Yes, yes. And before I ask you your next question, the next question I have for you, I want to, if you're listening to this right now, I want to offer you a question. Who and what are you giving your energy to right now that is keeping you in a place of stuckness? I think that question can be so powerful for you right now, listener. And, if you're listening in your car, obviously don't write anything down. But when you get home, next time you stop, start a list and keep it with you and keep that list running of who are the people that are helping me stay stuck and where are the environments and what are the things that I'm holding on to that are doing exactly what Vanessa is telling us right now, are keeping us stuck, are subconsciously giving us permission to not shift our perspective around this. And so you have a framework, and I can completely relate with you when you say, a lot of people, they know what they need to do. They just have no idea what to do it. They need that, like that step-by-step guidance, because I see the same thing in finance. We have a CFO framework, and it's the same exact thing. People know that their money story needs to change, but they have no idea how to start taking the steps to do it. And so for your framework, you mentioned, and this may or may not be step one, the first thing we need to do is look at where is our time going and where does it not need to go. Is that the first step?
Really is. I mean, we call it a time and energy audit. Excuse me. Time and energy is like we're really looking at, yes, how are you really allocating time? And this is a great exercise for attorneys who are so used to billing, you know, even, 6 minutes. So they're used to tracking time. And often what we find from that is, again, they'll see like all the hours that they're working, but all of the things that they're doing way beyond the billable hours. And we actually do a calculation. Again, you'll probably like this. It's, great little spreadsheet calculation. You'll appreciate it. It's very eye-opening for our women because it's basically what is the real value of your time. We talk about the billable hour and it's great to brag, right? The billable hour is, $400 an hour or whatever. But when we start to look at the amount of hours that they are spending working, taking that over a year, including obviously a little bit of vacation time, although many of them are barely having that. And then we look at their revenues, like imagining that they are the chief revenue officer because they're responsible typically for everything. And then we calculate that into this is what your hour is actually worth. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, like that is so low, right? That is scarily low given my experience, everything I'm doing, the impact I'm making, where I want to go. So that can be a real wake up call there. The second wake up call is then often but okay, let's imagine that we do a calculation and your hour turns out to be worth $200 an hour, right? Depending on, again, the size of revenues. But now all of a sudden we'll find out that you're wasting your time doing $20 or $25 an hour tasks that you could easily get a VA, a legal assistant, right? Use some sort of outsourced help to do. And then those tasks are also draining energy. So it's a double loss. It's like, so we'll start to say, do you realize you're actually losing $175 every time, per hour, every time you engage in that? And then there's the opportunity cost that's lost because it's draining and you don't have any energy left over for the things that could actually be generating more. So looking at it through that time and energy audit. And the other way that we approach that, so we'll look at, what are the things that really make money that only you can be doing, that are revenue generating? What are the things that are energizing? Because that often speaks to their zone of genius, right? And the things that they should be doing and only they can be doing. The draining ones, again, it's, there's a conflict there with their creativity because if we're draining energy, it's very difficult to go from draining to now let me be creative and inspired. And we have an exercise that kind of goes with this, which is what we call the $1 million question. And the $1 million question is, what are you tolerating? So you were sort of touching on it with the question that you offered the listeners earlier around like who or what is keeping you stuck. And so it's similar, right? It's like, what are you tolerating? And we say you don't get what you want, you get what you tolerate. And current tolerations reflect your standards, your current standards. And so we've got to raise the bar, we've got to raise those standards as well. And a big part of that growth, and this is the piece that links back to kind of like the overwhelm and the time, and frankly, more joy and fun in the firm, because I don't think I've ever heard, actually, I mean, this is something that we created years ago. I don't think I've ever heard anybody talking about business growth, but talking about it through the lens of let's remove tolerations. Most business growth builds on top of what's already there, right? And certainly that's what I saw when I was working inside of the big law firms and other big firms. That race to the top and the raise to the top is just taking on more stuff, hence the hours, hence the overwhelm. But you're kind of like the big fat paycheck is that's the perk, right? You have to take on all of this stuff, and that's the payoff. What we are saying is no, this is completely outdated. Let's really look at, those things that you're tolerating. You've been trained to think that it was okay. Let's release those tolerations so that you are only, not only initially, but I mean, it's a process of getting to zone of excellence and zone of genius. And then there are other people that you can pay that, frankly, their zone of excellence or their zone of genius are your tolerations, right? Or they simply no longer need to be there, right? We can dump them. So we're really kind of changing that model. And that's the piece that comes back to, no, when we help you grow, we're not helping you kind of suck it up and just take on more and more and more and push through and do it the tough way. We're having a conversation around, let's get a list of tolerations. Like, what are you tolerating right now? And let's look at some quick wins. Let's look at some of the really big ones. And we sometimes put dollar amounts to it. We were working with a client this week, and there's a team member that's a massive toleration. People often end up in that bucket. And when we really mapped out the dollars in terms of the stress, the lost hours, the opportunity cost, and everything, and kind of the knock-on effect, we came up with a calculation of 500,000 a year for that one toleration.
Oh my gosh.
And
I
that's not a pie in the sky, Chelsea, because I know some people listening in could go, yeah, yeah, it's easy. This was spreadsheets. This was data driven. This was, we've got the owner in front of us. Like, they're giving us the data. We're working through this. I mean, and they are seeing it for themselves for the first time, saying, whoa, I've been tolerating this for a long time. And it's having the much, much bigger impact than just financial, by the way. But we started by saying, let's put some dollars to this. And that's what it ended up being.
I think numbers and data and finance is a great place to start because numbers don't lie if there's no garbage in, garbage out. Numbers can be misleading and manipulated, but if your numbers and your data is solid, they are going to be the mirror that is facing you that you have to look at, that you have to consider. And so I really love and appreciate the power of numbers. And because I see it as the same thing, it's incredibly eye-opening. And one of the things that I see the most is around team members and
Mm.
tolerating team members, accommodating team members, and specifically for women, not only because of our historical conditioning and, who we are innately. I I think that women tend to tolerate people a little bit more because we have those big hearts. We want to take care of people. We want people to, that's just who we are. Do you see kind of the same thing? And how do you help people do that in a way that doesn't make them feel ethically conflicted?
Exactly, right. That's the point. Because my own podcast, and I'll share the reason for it because it's the title, right? It's basically this piece here. My own podcast is Get Rich Without Being a Bitch. And the reason for sharing that title is my deepest fear was that in order to be successful, I needed to become a cold-hearted bitch and a version of myself that I would absolutely loathe, right? So this was a big story, hence I kind of built the podcast and that brand around it. And so that's where if we really dive in, it's often the fear of I will be perceived a certain way. Now, a lot of women do relate to the bitch piece because, again, societally, that's been used to control us, right? And God forbid that you would be perceived like that and you'll be the outlier and nobody will want to be around you, right? So, but some other women have another version of it. This is the version of themselves that they don't want to be. And so oftentimes what we see is then there's this overcompensation,
Mm.
right? I used to do exactly the same myself. Because we don't want to be this over here, we compensate over here. And so it looks like, people pleasing, toxic niceness. We're never saying the things that we really want to say. People pleasing comes up a lot in my world. And that people pleasing, as you've touched on, leads straight into lack of boundaries. We're always available. We're not saying no. We're not having the hard conversations. All of a sudden, the team members, it's not the leadership that's saying this is how we do things around here. We've got the team members saying this is how I'm doing this around here.
Mm.
Um, so yes, and it is interesting. I mean, I don't have the data at my fingertips, but I know that statistically women hire considerably less than our male counterparts. We're kind of loath to hire. So, again, I think that's a lot of conditioning. We've been taught that, we're supposed to do it all. We're kind of like that superwoman syndrome. A lot of women will readily admit that they're kind of control freaks, sometimes slight control freak in recovery, right? I don't want to let go. And again, it's all of these things that can keep us stuck. And so that's what we find as well, is that then when they go into hiring, if they're not aware of those patterns, those former patterns are the very thing that kind of leads to the team dysfunction, for want of a better word, and almost reinforcing a pattern back to women that, like, you see, this is why I don't want to hire, and this is why I don't want to have team. And that's that other place that we're like, no, we're doing this very differently. We are really going to do this differently. And again, one of the mindset shifts that we have there is your team is there to support you and your vision, not the other way around. You've got an amazing mission that you're on, you've got a big vision, and they are here to support that, not you as the leader are here to kind of just keep pouring into your team. Now, of course, do we have to develop people and pour into them? Of course we do. But it's still that shift of, no, you are the leader, your vision, your mission, your culture, your values, and let's attract people into that space, as opposed to possibly trying to attract them through people pleasing and over niceness. And before you know it, you've agreed to virtual working for your paralegal, and it absolutely was never going to work for you in the vision that you had.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to your comment about, your foundation. Is if your foundation is built in such a way that's not in alignment with everything we're talking about here, if you're listening to this and you have a team already and you're hearing, oh my gosh, I have built a foundation with a team with an unclear vision, core values and mission, we're not on the same place. All of these things are hitting home. It sounds like one of those situations where like your foundation is built not only in systems and processes, but in core values and vision and mission. And, maybe you've been on the grind for so long and your focus has been building, but you're realizing I have built a foundation that's actually shaky and prone to crumble based on where I realize now that I want to go. So, for the listeners that are thinking that in their minds right now, what would you say to them in terms of you have this thing, you're realizing that your foundation is not where you need it to be? What is the hope for them?
Oh, it's such a great question, because it actually came up in my world this week that we were having this conversation. I had a group of attorneys with me, and one of them said, oh my gosh, I've been practicing. I think she was at least 20, 25 years in, so seasoned. She was not a newbie. And she's like, Vanessa, like, everything that you're saying has made me realize that my foundation, like, I've just built this, ad hoc foundation, is very shaky. And the fear that came up was, I need to completely tear everything down and start from zero at this point in my career, which is a really scary thought, right? But it's not the first time I've heard that. I hear that a lot. So I would say, honestly, no, it is incredibly rare that you have to tear everything down. In fact, we're not about like taking like unnecessary risks. We're about taking some very educated, calculated risks and transition plans, and really thinking through these things. So in fact, what I shared with her is, I said, can I just give you a little bit of a reframe? Like instead of the tearing down, I'm sharing a lot from a lot of experience here. And by the way, you couldn't possibly implement this all like in a short time frame. This is, what we're doing is several years process, right? To really get to that CEO level and freedom and all the rest of it. So I said, let's ground it in some good good timelines and expectations first and foremost, so you can breathe again. So there was a first little bit of relief. And then I said, the other invitation I want to, invite you to like reframe this is we call it a reset. Instead of the tearing down, would you be open to considering a short-term reset where you actually kind of just take a little step back? Typically, of course, it's with the help of a coach and somebody that, knows what they're doing, because on your own, it's really difficult to think through these things. And I said, and the reset is to kind of reset the foundation. Some of these things that we've been talking around, like who are your ideal clients? We call them champagne clients in our world. We do an analysis of that. Many of the firms will discover that they've got 10 to 20% champagne clients, right? And they've got 90 to 80 beer clients, what we call beer or wine clients. And they're like, oh, no wonder. Like, that's a reset, because then we can analyze, who are your ideal clients for you and your firm, and start to think about a strategy to get in front of them. A reset, Chelsea, as we were saying, is around team, right? Is one of the firms that we're working with right now. The one we said we uncovered, a lot, a lot of money and lost revenue and profit because of this. Sometimes we have to reset the team. And that doesn't always mean firing the team and starting over, but it can be resetting expectations.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be doing things differently moving forwards. And I often say to my attorneys, there's good news and bad news is this. The good news is you'll see the team that is really committed to you and your vision, and they'll love the fact that you're raising standards and raising the bar, because high performers always love that. The bad news is, or I think it's good news, is you will have team members that self-select out. And I think it's good, because they get to be happier and rewarded elsewhere, and you get to reset the team. So I love the like, we're just taking a little bit of a pause, and that doesn't mean a pause from business. Like, we're just stepping back, and we're going to think about growth very intentionally. Like, let's do a reset, right? Let's look at some of these things, and then typically from there, women are then like, oh, okay, now I get it. I see what needs to happen. I can see the path. I can actually see not all of the roadmap. You don't have to, but I can see the way forwards. And again, that's the piece that starts to bring up that energy and the excitement, right? And again, that hope and optimism for a much better future with the firm.
Yeah, and it really is about just knowing the next couple of steps, right? Because trying to look at the end game can be overwhelming as well. And we're trying to help people get out of overwhelm, not give them a new overwhelm. And so I
Yes.
think that's important to realize too, we don't have to see the whole path. In fact, the path is going to change by the time we get there, and then we're going to have a new destination. So just knowing those next couple of steps is really all we need. And I appreciate how you reframe it to, like, we're not tearing down the foundation. We're doing a reset, and it starts with you defining what it is you want, what you're no longer willing to tolerate. And naturally, when you do a reset like this, like you said, the A players are going to reveal themselves, and the people that aren't in alignment are also going to reveal themselves. And yes, it's a hard decision, but in the end, it's probably going to work out better for them, and it's going to work out better for you and the business that you're building.
I was thinking as you were just saying this, Chelsea, the metaphor that was coming up, which I think we can all relate to, is our house, right? Um, we might want to do some renovation. Let's face it. I've been married 30 years. We moved, it was about 18 months ago to this new house. When we moved house, we had a whole new cleanup, right? But even 18 months in, there's clutter. Things are getting a little disorganized. Right now, we're in that place of going, we want to remodel, we want to do some things. But rarely in our home are we completely tearing it down and rebuilding from the ground up. It's very rare that we do that. And so I would encourage listeners to really think through that lens. This is like a refresh, right? That we want to remodel. And yes, perhaps we are going to be adding on an extra bedroom or the home office or the casita, right? That might be that new arm of the business. Perhaps we're cleaning things up. We're making it less cluttered. We're making it more efficient and frankly, a much more enjoyable environment.
Mm. And I think that's great. So, and the truth is, what you listener, if you know that this is all applying to you, what you have to lose if you don't make these hard decisions and do, yes, some of these are hard things, but if you choose to stay where you're at, consider what you have to lose. And that is a lot. And I'm so glad that they have people like you and me that they can go to because it's not easy. But it is so much more simple when you have someone that offers you a framework that gives you those exact steps, but also allows you to curate your own vision, your own firm, according to what it is that you really love doing in that firm. So for the people listening that know this is all applying to them, Vanessa, give them an idea of how your framework works, what it looks like, and how they can find you.
Yeah. So I'll start with the how they can find me. As I said, I did mention my own podcast, Get Rich Without Being a Bitch, and there's a whole series on there. It's actually happening right now, specifically for women-owned law firms. But pretty much everything that's on there is relevant across the board anyway. So that's a good free resource. Businessgrowthacademy.com, Business Growth Academy, not the Business Growth Academy. Otherwise, you'll end up with a CPA firm in the UK. So that's a great place, again, to find us. And there's some free things there. There's actually a free community that I've just launched called the Legal Collective. So again, trying to like really give a lot of free resources to support women-owned law firms, so that they can have a taste and really see if our methodology and mindset aligns. If at that point we're looking for help, typically the first place we start is the reset, right? Is that program where I said like let's start. We typically do about 4 to 6 weeks together. With my team, we do a financial analysis as well to really kind of see what are the key things that are happening. Look at those champagne clients, look at team, look at the tolerations, and really start to get some quick wins. So that is just an excellent place to get started. And again, it's back to, frankly, 4 to 6 weeks from now, or that 4 to 6 weeks from that decision, you can truly be in a very different place, which is not a lot of time to invest for, I think, really building a firm that as the firm gets bigger, life is going to get a lot better.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. You talk about champagne clients, which I love, by the way. It's such a fun way to do it. Who is your champagne client?
Yeah, so the women that we get to do our best work with are typically already over that 250, 300,000 in annual revenue. Obviously, they're women-owned law firms, and they're really hit what is, that messy middle of growth. So again, they've typically plateaued in what they're doing. They're maxed out on time. They don't have that roadmap. They want to grow. They want to build that seven-figure firm, but they certainly want to build it on their terms, and not be burning out in the process. So that's who we love to have conversations with.
Oh, that's perfect and a perfect way to describe it, the messy middle, because it really, really is. And so I love that those are your champagne clients because they absolutely need the most support and guidance. Well, I appreciate everything that you've said today. This conversation was everything I knew it would be. I know our listeners are going to appreciate it, and there are going to be some people that are empowered, as you should be. And so I want to leave our listeners knowing and understanding that it's okay to feel like you're lost. It's okay to feel like things are broken and not to know what to do. That is why we are here. That is why Vanessa is available to you. We have all of her links and her podcast in the show notes. So if this is hitting home for you, I really encourage you to reach out and talk to Vanessa and her team. And Vanessa, I've loved having you, and I want to give you the opportunity to leave our listeners with a parting message too.
Oh gosh, there's always so many. I know it sounds trite, but I really do believe this. I just think life is just way too short, right, to be tolerating less than your dreams. And we know that we're in the business of helping women really achieve their dreams. So we know what's possible. We see it every single day. And that's what I would say is like, come back, connect back in with those dreams. Take, just 15 minutes, start to reconnect with that, get those desires burning, and then get support to make it happen.
Mm. And today, on this page in history, is the perfect day to start, especially for women. So,
Always.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Really been a pleasure.
So, here's the truth: you do not have to tear it all down to rebuild. You don't have to grind your way to freedom, and you definitely don't have to become someone you hate just to be successful. What you do need is the courage to pause, to take a beat and reset, to do what Vanessa calls a re-architecting of your firm, your vision, and your standards. If you're stuck in the messy middle, maxed out on time, unclear on vision, tolerating more than you'd like, this is your moment. Everything Vanessa shared today, from her time and energy audit to her champagne client method, is a map. You just have to decide to follow it. Check out Vanessa's podcast, Rich Without Being a Bitch. We'll leave all the links to get in touch with her in the show notes. And if your numbers are the piece that's holding you back, your cash flow, your systems, your role as CFO, reach out to me and my team. Let's build something that reflects the life you actually want to live. Until next time, stop tolerating what keeps you stuck. Reclaim your time, your money, and your power. Thanks for tuning in to the CSG Law Firm Podcast. If today's conversation sparked something for you, an idea, a challenge, or even a little discomfort, that's exactly the point. We're here to rethink the way law firm owners approach money, leadership, and growth. If you're ready to dive deeper, connect with me and my team and learn more about Core Solutions Group and what we do, head on over to our website in the show notes, yourcoresolution.com. Because sometimes all it takes is a fresh perspective and the right people in your corner. Until next time, keep building with intention, lead with clarity, and remember, the numbers tell the story, but you get to write the next chapter.